Okay. Cool.
You're good.
Yeah. All right. So this is our a junior jumper. Little background on him. He could be pretty good in all three. Uh, he's like 22 long jump, 10 steps like 44 triple, and PR 6'4" in high jump. So pretty versatile kid. And this was last year, so he's a sophomore. This is out at the A6 Mount Carmel meet, uh, where you could see you'll see some issues as he goes through. But give it a play, and then talk about a couple things.
Should be on a stand. Should be on a stand.
Ah,
Should be on a stand.
getting that going. All right, here we go. No, that's not what I want.
Yeah, just hit pause.
I'm trying to get to pause, but it just jumps to that when I hit pause.
You're hitting stop. You got to hit pause on the far left.
Oh, yeah, I'm an idiot. There we go. All right. So with his name's Abdul. Actually, Abdul Kareem Toheed Lawal. So we call him AKTL because that's just a mouthful. But overall, just a pretty bouncy kid. Pretty good gait. When from what I see, what he was having issues with last year for the most part was just steering. Like he was just all over the place where he was hitting the board. A lot of times it was short. And here, you can kind of see he's on that penultimate, he's hitting, not far in front of the hips. That last step's pretty long and he's just short. So it's just like he consistently had an issue of identifying like where the board was. The other issue he would have at times was kind of getting through the landing a little bit, and his angle, his takeoff angle, a lot of times was pretty high. So I mean, it would be. I did a couple where it was like, like in the 26 range. So I think that could have been part of it, where it was just kind of plopping down on the landing a little bit. So I don't know if you guys see anything, but those are the two things that he tended to struggle with. And I guess we can talk about just how, like if a jumper had those types of issues for you guys, what you would do to address, or if you see anything different. So jump on in.
I like how bouncy he is down the runway. I watched this, and a couple of the videos I posted them on there, especially like Kenyon. I'm not sure which one I sent, but I heard Caberna say one time, you want your jumpers to look like a bouncy ball down the runway, and you see it with him. But that's why when we get to some of my videos, you don't see that bounce. So that's one of the good things I see and just love up to this point right here.
Yeah, I just think when he starts his last 4 steps or so, he's too far from the board to ever really set up his jump. And when his foot plants that far in front of him at the takeoff, it's not a surprise that he has a lot of flight, too much flight on his takeoff, and his takeoff angle is too high. So if I was just, hey, Joey, I got to go, coach high jump, can you take him for this long jump? I would probably ask him to move up by 1.5 feet. Just so that last step doesn't have to be so long, and he can, use the bouncy run that he created coming in and continue that instead of having to reach like crazy, trying to find the board at the end.
Yeah, and that was kind of the crazy thing with him is he would he would consistently be short on the board, but like you would see it within, he would alter his steps to kind of, I think he thought, that he was like all over the board, and he wouldn't be consistently, like even when we would adjust. And so essentially he would just kind of steer himself to get to that point where he was feeling comfortable, where he felt like he needed to get that foot way out there to get height. And the big thing that I kept telling him was just leave, get the foot down, leave that foot on the board as long as you can, and just try to, like most kids, height is more of an issue. I find like they're more line drivers. With this kid, it was like, no, just, I once he started triple jumping, I was like, I want you to feel like you're triple jumping off the board when you long jump. And it made some differences this year, but this is probably, I think, going to be his weakest event, to be honest.
Gotcha.
But unless he just decides to go crazy next year and do all three, but time will tell. So, cool. Anything else there?
I also see, and this is maybe a little bit of chicken and egg, but he is a little bit anterior tilted and backside. Not like at all severely, and most of us would be pretty happy with where he's at, but in trying to take him from a very good sophomore junior to a state level senior long jumper, if he were to get the hips all the way under him and try to get complete neutrality, I think he would find it a lot easier to steer, because when you're so backside, you don't really feel what's going on in front of you, and it makes it really hard to find the board when that's the case. Again, he's not really backside with his running and his max velocity mechanics, but it's not like really 50% happening in front, 50 in back. It's like 40 and 60. And with an athlete that's so bouncy, I think all that flight time does make it hard to find the board. So so working on trying to be a little bit more frontside and max velocity might help him with that. But with better athletes, it's always tough. Like, all right, do we ask him to change that pretty drastically and then let him lose what he's comfortable with his timing, or do we just let it be?
Yeah.
But
and he's one where you can't tell if he's sprinting or if he's running at like 70%. It just looks the same. Like, it's just like, it's like, dude, like we're running flies today. Like, can you act like, just maybe make it look like you're trying to run as fast as you can? But he got better with that this year, I will say. But it was just like we honestly like couldn't tell. Everything just kind of looked the same, which is kind of a good thing, right? He's at peace when he's running and all that. But
that makes sense why he's a good triple jumper too. Because I find like the best triple jumpers, they handle their top speed really, really well. And so if his top speed always looks really smooth and relaxed, then that lends itself very well.
Have you guys used the I know Altus tweets it. Is it Altus or Altus? Altus?
Yeah.
They tweet the 6 pictures. They have a name. I forgot what they call them. Where it's like the strike and all that. I use that with a couple guys just to show them. And I know every sprinter is different. Every jumper, not everybody has the same mechanics. But I had a kid who was real backside. He was probably like 70% backside, 30% front side. And we did that. We did those 6 pictures where we kind of freeze framed him, compared him to the others. Man, just that visual, just letting him see, each one of those 6 poses compared to where he was. The light bulb went on after he saw that. It was pretty awesome. So
that's good.
Cool.
Yeah.
And
I haven't created any of them. I usually use 3 frames, like the touchdown, where we'll just show it touchdown, flight, and then like toe off. You know,
Yeah.
those three are kind of the big ones that I'll go through with a lot of kids, as we're just watching gait. So that's cool. Are you pretty efficient doing it? I've heard they're kind of a pain in the butt to make.
Yeah, no, not really. I use huddle technique and just kind of screenshot them, and we kind of do one at a time. Makes it easier for me. Just to, instead of trying to do a whole one together, we'll say let's look at MVP, let's look at touchdown, let's look at full support, just to make it simpler for me.
Cool.
Yeah, but I like that because it helps. I've never thought of this, but I think it helps dial down what the kids are looking at, right? Because if you give them a video of themselves and you share that with them on Huddle Technique, they could be watching it, but they're not seeing what you want them to, or they, they read the comments and then they're like, oh man, but look at how high I got off the ground. This is great. And if you send them that kinogram, like that's the only thing that they have to look at.
Kinogram.
Yeah. And Altus has a big, long, nice PDF on that. But I hadn't thought about how nice it would be to just send them those pictures where they can only hone in on that. It's like, oh, shoot, okay, so there's my problem.
Yeah.
Rob just emailed you a drive with the videos I had. And I can add more if you want. I just put in some jumpers from SIUE, and they weren't Edwardsville people because I figured Carrie might put some on.
You know what? Like Rob said before you were on, it's tough to find good long jump film. I
have some good stuff if you want. I put only bad stuff on there.
I put some bad, but just people standing in the way, bad angles. I mean,
I see what you're saying.
I hate it. Like it. My long jump film is pretty much terrible. So I had to dig all the way back.
By the time triple jumps gets going, it's not a problem. But long jump, everyone's standing around. Yeah. And indoor facility, I have nothing. Like it's just there's just nothing.
That's actually Proviso's pretty nice for that. We have our filmers stand in the bleachers and film, and it's about as clear as you can get at an indoor high school meet.
That place is awesome.
Yeah. I'll talk about this real quick. We won't watch Quentin go all the way, but this, when we were just talking about changing someone's gait, like when you watch Quentin run, it's like ugly. So I'll just show it real quick. Like, I mean, he is so tense, but I was just like, I'm not going to change that because like, I don't know if getting him to be like more relaxed in the upper body is going to, I mean, I think eventually it would help him, but I don't think it was going to help him within the year that 2 years essentially. There was more to work on the first year with him, but like he's just so uptight, and I was just like, yeah, we're just going to focus on some other things because like you have to get tension from somewhere, right? And I just don't know if that was just something that I should mess with. I didn't know if it was going to lead to any good results, so we just kind of left that one alone.
And his lower body is really solid. He's tight up in the shoulders, and his arm action isn't as full as you'd want if you're giving a clinic. But I mean, he runs better than the first guy we saw in terms of a little bit more of a controlled stride and being a little bit more front side coming into the board.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This was his freshman year. This will be the last one of my guys I watch here. He is, you'll see captain backside. So he jumped 6.3, I think, this year. So this was towards the end of last year. I mean, incredibly, typical freshman, super inconsistent. Typically would not ever get upright in an approach this is actually probably pretty good for him last year, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Looks kind of flat.
Yeah.
Kind of. I got a couple coming up very similar where my young guys, it's looks like the first phase of the triple jump coming off. It's just no setup and it's a line drive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, we've worked a ton with him just in terms of getting better front side, putting better force into the ground. And he's come quite a long way. He's also matured quite a bit too. So I remember like the first day of practice, they were just messing around on a basketball court, and he just 2-foot jump went up and just, and I was like, okay, so that's going to be fun.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so with him, besides just, you'll see at the start, his posture is terrible coming out at the, just right out the gate. The head's down. It just looks like my 80-year-old grandma kind of, and that's still an issue. And he's also like, the typical teenage boy where like, I can only give him one thing. And if he has to be told something to focus on like 3 times, like even like right when he's about to do it, it's just like, dude, remember you got to do this. He's like, oh, okay. And then he's athletic enough where he'll do it, but it just like a lot of times it's in one ear out the other. So one thing he does struggle with, he kind of had, I don't know if we can really see it here, besides the fact, he's all, again, pretty inconsistent in his approach. He will have just like that where he just kind of plops down in the landing. Mm-hmm. This one, it actually looks a little bit better, but what do you guys do when you have a jumper who just kind of, it's like their feet hit, there's no action, and it's just like down into the sand, anything special you do there?
I go on the high jump mat and just kind of work on some little pop-ups there, because if they don't finish and get their feet up on the high jump mat, then they're face planting. So I don't do it a lot, but just to kind of get that sensation of getting their feet up. And I had, Justin White, he was he could never get one of his feet through, and we went to the high jump mat a few times, but with him we were stretched so thin that kind of had to focus on a little bit here and there, but that's what we did with him. And he never got that fixed, where he would always drag something behind him.
He barely got there by the end of his freshman year of college. But he did. One thing I noticed with him was when sorry, I'm eating my apple. When he wouldn't be good about leaving his penultimate foot behind him, and he would just kind of run off the board instead of set up and jump off the board.
Yes.
Then his feet tended to land early. His penultimate foot specifically.
Yeah. So pause on the penultimate here, just as he's getting ready to go toe off, and I know it's a little grainy, but so with Justin right here, one time I told him, like, he was struggling, as you said, with that penultimate. It was just kind of running off the board. And I said, think about pushing your penultimate knee down. And I heard Caberna say it one time, push down with your shin angle, just to leave that foot behind and get the displacement of the hips. Mm-hmm. And the next jump, I think he broke 21 for the first, like 21-2, and still drug his foot. But like that light bulb went on where he was like, that's how I get my height. And it was just a cue that he's the only kid I've ever used that cue with on his penultimate step, where I say, push down with that shin, push down with that knee, just to leave it behind, get that displacement. And man, it from then on out, it was still a struggle at times, but
yeah,
I could use that cue, like, hey, push down, push down, push down. And for him, it made sense.
Yeah.
It might not make sense for 90% of my kids or your kids, but for him, that one, I loved it and it worked.
Yeah. Rob, the other thing that I think with this athlete here And like the ploppiness is, again, going back to hips. So if you just think yourself of like, if you're going to do a vertical jump and try to do something in the air, whether it's like tuck your knees up or, do a little flutter kick or whatever. If you start with your chest leaning over and then jump with your chest still leaning over, it's a lot harder to control and be patient and feel something in the air than if you're upright and have good posture underneath you. And so most of the time when athletes plop, it's either they have posture that needs help going in, or they finally are jumping pretty well and they do need to learn like the patience of letting the sand come to them. And so maybe like last year it was his posture, and if it's happening this year, it's because he's finally, jumping in that mid 6 meter range and he's ready. Like, wait, where's the sand? It's supposed to be here right now. And so then the high jump mat helps. Even just telling them, I like showing film of Marquise Dendy for it, because he does it so exaggeratingly that it's easy for the kids to see. But he really
Ward.
No, God, never. Sorry, Jamari. But he like tucks his knees into his chest and then sweeps his hands down and his feet out, and it really like, it's so explicit how he gets the knees in and then out towards the sand. And if you do all that in the air, there's no way that the sand will come early to you, from my experience.
Cool. Yeah. All right. I'll jump over here. You see all those?
Yeah. Go to the bottom. Yeah.
Okay.
One of my favorite track and field meets, and I wish this was back on our schedule. This is Glenbard West, I think.
Let's go tennis.
Oh yeah, I recognize those ribbons anywhere.
Oh. So I think this is his senior year. Pretty special kid here. But you can see he's a pretty good floater. I didn't get much time with him because he was so valuable on the track. Basically, I had about 10 minutes a week with him. And I guess sometimes when you get a kid this special, get out of the way and just let him go. You'll see here he's pretty flat on his jump, but I think this was a 23-1, and you can see, I mean, it's not going to be pretty, but when you're that fast, I always told him he squatted a little early there. I always try to focus on high hips, and I thought he would break down here. Maybe why this happens. This is the eventual state champion in 2015.
10 minutes a week, man.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
That's got to be some kind of record.
I mean, Lakatos followed him around like with a leash on him, making sure we didn't jump too much, because again, we had a pretty special 4x1. And but again, as far as being bouncy down the run, he was almost too wide sometimes, and he had some steering issues because he was almost ice skating side to side. But once he got full speed, man, he was a sub-1 10-meter fly. And again, just make sure he's on the board and get out of his way and let him do his thing. And that year we knew 23 mid would win state because there weren't any big ones. But again, one thing I worked on with him is at penultimate, I always like to cue high hips. And I know it's not perfect, and it's kind of hard to do that. And then you watch somebody like Dwight Phillips, and they have, he kind of sinks his hips before his penultimate too. But I'd always cue Fontes right in practice. The 10 minutes I did have high hips as you get into your penultimate step there. He would displace a lot on the backside. But again, when he probably was a 10.6 FAT, 100-meter dash. When you're that fast and got that much pop, just like I said, just 10 minutes a week, make sure he's got his step and little things here and there. And
probably don't want him thinking too much.
no, because he did. He thought he knew everything. So, but this is an example of, just kind of sometimes you just got to sit back and let them do their thing, because he was hard-headed. And like the more I coached, the more the worse it got. So,
But I mean, this is about
what's that?
This is about as good as it gets for a high schooler, technically. I mean that as a huge compliment. Like there's very little to pick apart here.
So talk about, like, for me, penultimate step, I always like to tell my kids to keep their hips up through it, especially in practice when we're going slow, like right as he's grounding his penultimate. I always try to get that sensation of keeping your hips up before, so go one more frame, can you? One more, yeah, like right there. I'm always cueing high hips, high hips, high hips. How do you guys attack as far as grounding your penultimate? Do you want to see that hip displace after full contact, before, during?
I usually just go with, like, when we're working through run jumps.
Yeah.
The first thing that we'll do is just heel toe takeoff. Then we'll go heel toe penultimate or rocking chair, whatever you want to call it, and then depending on the athlete, because by then we'll probably have some short approach jumps in. Like some of them I won't even cue the hips if they're just doing it.
Yeah.
And things look good, then we won't really discuss much. But if athletes are having a little bit of trouble with lowering the hips after the penultimate, so heading into it, I just want that heel toe action, and a lot of times that'll take care of things. But if not, then with like the run jumps, we'll do heel toe penultimate, just try to lower the center of mass a little bit, and then heel toe takeoff. So that's kind of how I typically handle it. But I would agree, like heading into the step, still high hips, and then lower once they're in that area right there.
Yeah, I definitely want the hips as high as can be going into the penultimate, because the higher the hips are, the more likely it is that they'll lower between the penultimate and the takeoff and not like pop back up onto the takeoff, which kind of kills that loading effect you're trying to get.
Yeah.
To get his hips higher though, I always want to look at what happened on the third to last step. So his third to last step compared to like the sprint steps happening 3 or 4 steps before that has a much more horizontal projection. So as he's coming off of this step, he's pushing pretty far back, as you can see from, how like where his foot is as it comes off the ground. Yeah. And it's not like that, 2 steps before when the foot comes off the ground, it recovers a lot more vertically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, because he sets up and lands in the penultimate well, he clearly has a good sense for it being underneath him. He's as tall as he can be given how forward he pushed on that third to last step, I would say. So I would just ask him to feel a little more flight coming into the penultimate step, and that'll help him land higher. But the first couple times you do it, you might see them hopping onto it. You might see them like sticking their penultimate foot out because that extra air time, they don't know, exactly where to put it. But
do you cue to push up in your third?
Yeah, push up in the third. That's usually what I'll talk about if they're not landing tall enough when the penultimate, hits full touchdown. Unless they're actually pushing up well and then they're just like sitting onto it, which happens, but it's more likely that their third to last step isn't projecting quite vertically enough for there to be room to land tall.
I think this is the last time at this meet. This is the last time he ever jumped under 23, which was, it was once once we got him on the board, man, and the light bulb went on, he was a machine. He was pretty special athlete. He went to West Virginia, play corner, but didn't work out. But that's just phenomenal athlete. So
didn't he win state with one jump?
Yeah. Yep.
Nice.
He went 23.6 on day one and stood around and watched, and pretty cool moment. It's why I have a tattoo. So I lost a bet to him, and I thought in a million years he'd never win state, but well, I got a tattoo for the rest of my life to prove it. Let's see. Let's go to far right-hand side, number 3. A couple decent ones here. So again, you can't see beginning of his jump. Welcome to Belleville West Invite. We should have been filming from the bleachers, but I think Jamari Ward just went like 29.7 right before this, so he was a little nervous. This is Devontae Tincher.
2 of my knuckleheads right here.
Oh yeah, you guys.
Yeah.
So his biggest issue, and Coach P, I know you'll probably be able to second this, probably had nothing to do with any mechanics or technical issues with the jumps. It was, he had a lot of anxiety, and I think a lot of his issues were between his ears and just maintaining his, he was really high and really low. He had really high waves. And I think for the big thing coaching Devontae, it wasn't about jumping. It was about getting him calm and getting him in the right mindset.
Yes.
So for him, I always felt like once he got to the triple jump boards, something started to click in his mind that I'm getting ready to long jump. So his sprint mechanics would really start to change very early. He would start setting up too soon. I don't think you see it as bad in this one. I think this is his PR. This is 23.4 and a quarter. But even here, I think if you just let it play. I don't know if you can see it in this one, but he had a tendency. It's like when he crossed that 40 board, he was already in long jump mode, and see if we can see a change in stride pattern here. Yeah. Man, I miss hearing that voice. It'll be a while.
Yeah.
But again, another pretty elite sprinter. Good bounce. Kind of jumping, but I think again with the issue for him, he was just so darn fast and so springy that it was like, keep your thoughts out of the way and forget about everything else and just go jump. And my job as a coach for him wasn't really about too much on the runway. It was just, get him in the right mindset.
And he was super consistent his senior year, wasn't he? I mean, throughout the season. I mean,
yeah, until sectionals.
No, I know the sectional deal, but like outside of that, like he was.
I don't think
always, right?
So once we got to like good outdoor meets, I don't think he was under like 22.7 or 22.8 the entire year. Maybe a duel or something. Maybe our first meet indoors he was, but I mean, he was very consistent. And it was always, 22.10, 23.1. I mean, he was just – he was Mr. Consistent, and then section.
And then he wasn't. I remember getting that phone call.
Yeah. The worst part was we were in like Moline, and so talk about a long 3.5-hour bus ride home.
You guys still won state, so it worked out okay.
Yeah, true. With
and
my
he
guys
won it, right? I mean, it was
points,
he was the 200, right?
Yeah, he had the score. He had to get 5th, I think, or 6th. And he,
I just things like that. You know, there's no reason why an athlete like that shouldn't be at the state meet. Like
Yeah.
just the one shot nature of sectionals just.
and the issue I had at sectionals, so he got called away in finals to go do the 4x1, comes back in the event, judge makes him jump on and go immediately because they were waiting for him. No transition time, like put your shoes on and go. And so that I wasn't too happy as a coach, and I fought pretty hard to not let him jump. And well, that's one of those times when I wish I would have had the board because, you know, sometimes people aren't making the best decision for the athletes; they're making decisions for themselves. And so again, you know, two of my better jumpers here, just both of them were very bouncy. Both of them had good spring. Technically, both of them, you know, for the high school level, were pretty consistent and pretty good. And so we'll, you know, I wanted to show these two first as we get into my other jumps. But let's go to so video 5, the first one here. It's straight on. It's this year at Proviso.
I keep doing this. I gotta.
So this kid, he's a sophomore this year. He's in he's got some mechanical issues. Oh man, that doesn't looked a lot better on my phone. But he's broke one in the 10-meter fly multiple times. We didn't believe it. So this kid's speed, speed. And you'll see here, I mean, his jump, it's a line drive. He was a 41-foot triple jumper last year as a freshman, but kind of think that long jump's going to be his event. Actually, this one's a little bit better than I thought. This might be his other jump. But again, he doesn't know what to do in the air, obviously, which he tells me, he said, "Coach, I don't know what to do in the air." And I said, "Well, we'll work on that in May." So we just don't do a whole lot. We'll kind of do little things here and there, but his biggest issue is steering. As fast as he is, he usually runs with his chest out. And I know from this angle it's hard to see. He really crosses the midline on his steps, just very inconsistent. But man, can this kid run?
It looks like it hurts.
No, he did that on a triple jump last year, buckled his knee, and so he's again like he's pure speed. I think he went 0.97 on our 10-meter fly outdoors with spikes. But I think this was like 20'9" or 20'7", something like this. Is our first meet. This is his first time long jumping since probably about, beginning of April last year. So again, I think he'll probably be my number one long jumper next year. But you can see just kind of a crapshoot on if he hits the board or not. I think he was right on the back edge here. And one thing I always talk about with Mike, go to in flight, like right off the board. So again, I don't spend a lot of time coaching in air mechanics, just with the time I have, especially with elite sprinters. Lakatos doesn't give me a lot. So I don't work a lot of in air. I feel like there's bigger things to worry about when you get 10 minutes a week. But his left leg here, I really like to see that leg get long and him get tall at one point instead of kind of, I call it the donkey kick, straight back underneath him. Leads to a lot of like forward rotation problems and, you know, just as far as finish goes. So one thing we'll work with him as we get into next year is that left leg is dropping it underneath. And sometimes I'll put a cone. We'll do like 3-step or 6-step pop-ups, whatever. And I'll put a cone right at the edge of the runway and tell him to try and step on that cone with his left foot, or get that sensation of letting that left foot fall underneath, not push, not kick back, just let it fall. And you know, usually that'll clear up a lot of the landing issues. And
yeah, I do the same thing. I've done it with long, and then same with triple, you know, dropping the free leg.
Yeah.
We actually have like a little 4-inch box that I'll put, and I'm like, step on the box. They're like, well, what if I step on it? I'm like, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not going to step on it, but try to.
But he, you know, he's a sophomore who just turned 15. So he's got some family members that are monsters. And so I hope that when this mess is over, I see this kid again, and he's a beast. But he's weak. If you looked at the muscle tone in his leg, go back to his penultimate. I mean, you can see some. I mean, it's crazy how fast he is with how weak he is, and he makes it work somehow. But he crosses the midline so much on his sprints. But speed's a pretty good thing to have, so that's why I put him on here. Just 20'8", 9, 6, whatever it was. I mean, that's not a pretty jump by any means, but when you got that speed, that'll fix a lot of things.
Yeah, and even, you know, most of the jumpers that I've had haven't really been fast. And, you know, I mean, when we've had fast kids, and some of our faster guys, they can't control it at all. So at least, I mean, he does have an ability here to control it. I mean, like you know, I've had multiple sub-1 guys come over and try to long jump, and it's just like, no, like they just, you know, they're slower at takeoff than the kids that are slower than them, you know?
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you who'd have been a stud at long jumps, Travis Anderson. I know he was pretty good in some other events, but I think he went 22-1 as a freshman in Hawaii.
What?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So that's, you know, a big thing with him is I think just getting the sprint mechanics in order will be you know, that's step one. And as that gets consistent, I think his long jumps will get more consistent. Let's see. Let's go to video 6. It's at U of I. I don't know if we're getting into Kenyon now.
there. Sorry. I'll remember to do this at some point right off the bat. I thought that dude was going to get trucked. I thought that's why you put the video on there.
So I think this is the same kid, I think, here, just a different angle. Yeah. You can kind of see some of his running issues here. And U of I is a weird place because that jump, if you told me that jump was under 20 feet, I would bet everything I have in my bank account that you were wrong. But that's like a 19.3 at U of I. And so I don't know, we just never jump well here, but
I've had the same experience at U of I.
It's crazy. I mean,
it is crazy.
This year, I thought for sure, like, oh, man, he just went 21. But anyway, better shot at his penultimate here.
I mean, it lands in a really solid spot.
Yeah, I like for him, I like, he does a good job of keeping his hips high through here.
Yeah, it's a lot more evident from this angle, the left leg, as it stays curled up.
Yes. And that's where right now he's crossing the end of the runway or into the sand, which is where I'd put the cone, doing a drill and say, hey, tap the top of that cone with that left foot just to kind of help. Again, like just as far as he does some natural things, I mean, just getting up and he's got some good hang time. It's just, there's a lot of, I like this kid because there's just a lot to work with and there's a lot of potential and he's a good kid and works hard. But you can see there's, from the first 2 jumps to this, there's just some big technical differences, landing, consistency.
He looks a lot like the second kid or the freshman kid that I was posting. Some similarities, at least in flight, probably not so much gait wise because this kid's definitely faster, but like that's what that kid typically looks like.
Yeah.
And so if you go back to like the peak of flight, right there, if the high jump mat is perfect for this, just teach him to tuck his knees into his chest and then extend the feet out. And that'll help it time up so he's extending his feet closer to the sand instead of so far away and plopping in.
So I've heard different people cue different things, but I've heard at the top of your jump, you should start your finish. Is that about?
That's how it should feel, but
that's how I cue it.
Yeah, that's how you should cue it. Like that's how it should feel to the athlete, but you don't want to anticipate it too much, and you also just have to remember you have to cue to the athletes. So if you're dealing with athletes like this, and Rob, your guy who just wait for the ground, they're like, oh well, it'll come eventually. I'll just chill up here and wait. Then you want to over cue in the other direction, and just say, hey, I want you to wait as long as possible to reach your feet out for the ground, and make them like overemphasize on this one. I want you to try to like not even extend the feet. Just wait to see how long does it take till the ground comes there.
Cannonball, straight cannonball.
Yes. And that's the one tough thing with using the high jump mat is the timing is much different. So it's like I wouldn't want to do it too much if you can help it. But Carrie, I know you guys, when it's not nice out, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah. Okay, and then I think the next 2 are both Kenyon, which kind of.
A quick note about using a high jump mat. You talked about putting a cone out there and feeling yourself with the long leg. If you do jump into a high jump mat, especially if you're in a situation where you don't have an indoor pit or an outdoor pit for that matter, just landing on that non-jump leg and running off of the high jump mat is a really easy way to teach it that also makes your kids a little, I think, less scared to land on the high jump mat because they're not like, oh, what if I don't do it right? Like, well, can you land on one leg and run?
Go to video 1 up and down here, coming straight at it. Yeah, I think these are both Kenyon. So Kenyon would have been a senior. Well, he is a senior, and unfortunately, not going to see what he got to do. But big thing with him, and it's going to be hard to see. I couldn't find anything great on him. He was a very squatty, low to the ground runner. He doesn't have a lot of vertical push in his sprint. But man, can he? And this one here isn't anything too special. This is where, so this is about late April, getting into early May, getting into championship season, and we had just finished cueing, finishing like we just talked about on the last jump, trying to finish at the peak because he was a holder. He came to me his sophomore year, and he would try and hold, and then thin it, and he could never get his feet extended. He was always landing with his feet underneath. So we tried to get, and you can still, a little bit late for my liking here, but just trying to get him to finish his jump sooner. And you can, I mean, still not perfect. His right hand, if you watch his right hand here,
Close.
that's where the mark was from, and this was a 22:11, the meet record. So I'd have liked to see where everything else hit, because pretty good one. But pretty interesting fact about Kenyon that I already talked to you guys about a little bit. He's jumping off his right foot, and he's a left-footed jumper. So the first thing we did this year was switch him. I feel like a failure as a jumps coach that he comes to me for 2 years, and I didn't figure out that he was a left-footed jumper until the beginning of his senior year.
Wow.
When he told me that piece of information, I thought, man, I would have really liked to known that, 2.5 years ago. But anyways, not bad to be a 23'8" jumper off his right foot. He does, as squatty and as inconsistent as he was on the runway. He's got freakish springs. He was a kid that when he got nervous, and here he's not, he's pretty loose here. But if I didn't even put a state long jump on here. Typically his 9-step approach was at about 99, 98 at state. During warm-ups, it was all the way up to a 95. And so when he got nervous, everything got tense and short. And again, going back to what I said about Devontae, this year coaching Kenyon probably wasn't going to be a lot about long jumping. It was going to be more about just his mental approach, which I mean, it's huge for jumpers. And he got nervous at state. He puked right before we went out there. And crazy thing about him, he was really good at hiding it. And so technically, I probably wouldn't have spent a lot of time coaching a lot of things other than jump off your left foot. But it would have been more about coaching his mental approach to jumping this year. But he was always good about keeping high hips through his penultimate. One thing he always liked to glue his chin. I don't know if you can see it. It looked like his chin's always Velcroed to his chest, which I know it's nothing too crazy, but I always like to tell him to just keep that head in a neutral position instead of Velcroing it to his chest.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying just in normal gait.
What's that?
Just when he's running, his chin would be down.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yes, and through it would start about right here, and then sometimes more than others, but you can kind of see he's a little bit. He gets it up here at the end. And then if you want to go, I think the Belleville West jump of his is from the side, and it's video 2. And again, he was usually really good about grounding his penultimate. You can kind of see he's not very bouncy, but he's 5'6", and I know everybody has a little bit different gait. But I mean, like right there, I did one of the what'd you call them, Joe? Kinograms?
Oh yeah.
And we compared his hip height at different positions, and he was always very squatty when he ran, and you can kind of see it here.
Mm-hmm. Was he a big, did he always get a lot of flight in his jumps? Like he hung up there for a long time?
Most of the time.
But usually the less bounce there is coming into the jump, the more they'll
Pop fly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that, as I said, the mental aspect with him, but sprint mechanics were one of the things, just being bouncy down the runway. And you don't really see it right here. This is still a pretty good jump. I think he won Belleville West invite, but that I don't think there were any great jumps that day. It was high 22, I think. But you can see this is before we watched the jump before. Again, that, you know, he would get in that reverse C position and just right there, and he would just almost hold it too long sometimes. And so, again, that's why I asked you guys, where do you cue that finish the jump? And for him, like right now, I would be saying, hey, we gotta be coming through already. He still finished all right.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I think he finished really well. This was better than the one before.
Yeah.
Timing-wise.
Mm.
And that's like, if I don't have any from, I told Rob before you got on, I don't even have a school record jump on film because I was running the event, and that's one of the things that sucks sometimes is get caught up and don't get them on film. But it got even better and even better and even better as we started to do this. All right, I think that's it for my guys.
All right, I'll I just got to go to figure out where my email is located, and my e-learning freaking 7. I have like nightmares of like Windows like taking over my life and just coming out of the screen and like freezing, like paralyzing me or something, just from all this trying to organize stuff e-learning wise. Any preference?
No, you can just go ahead and pick one. I picked all girls just because I figured they would be more like the people that others are coaching, because I was fortunate to coach a lot of good guys. So these are mistakes that you see from like your freshmen and sophomores, or if you're coaching girls, these are better girls as compared to, you know, big dog guys that we've seen.
You know, it's funny you say that. I heard a golf coach say that the other day. He said, if you're an amateur golfer, he said, don't watch Tiger Woods. He said, watch the LPGA. He said, their swings are more like yours than yours is Tiger Woods. And so, very good comparison.
So this was
I like looking at all the, you know, the elite women, you know, all of their if you look at like the reports from like the biomechanical analysis that IAAF puts out, like they're identical to elite high school guys.
Yeah, very
pretty cool.
Extremely close.
Yeah.
I always tell the boys, like, hey, if you can make NCAAs as a woman, you're starting to get pretty good.
I say that in high school too, but it's usually not a compliment.
So this was this athlete's freshman year, pretty early on. She really, really liked to throw her penultimate foot out in front of her and have it land like super heel first with the shin pointed back toward her. So at this point, we were working on just a vertical shin angle when her penultimate landed, and letting her feel how that allowed her to move through the jump a little bit more smoothly instead of like this jarring setup for the jump. So her left foot is her penultimate right there, yeah. You can see she still like cast it out a little bit, but by the time it hit the ground, it was at least vertical, which was a nice improvement. And her running sucked at this point of her career. If you want, I can put in a now and then of how it got by the time she was a junior. But she just loved to reach. She was a reachy athlete. And
this is what you're talking about with the leg straightening, right?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
land on the leg, right?
Run off of the pit, you have to straighten your leg and then feel that, and makes it pretty easy to, just say, hey, after you jump, run off the pit. You don't even need to worry necessarily about telling them to lengthen it and drop it down. It'll happen pretty naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you go back to the penultimate, as she pushes from the penultimate to the takeoff step, one thing that we began to work on later was asking her not to push so strongly from this position here, because she just loved to push really hard so she could load up her takeoff foot like crazy. And she notoriously fouled some real nice jumps, and also dealt with some hamstring issues on her jump legs sporadically, because when you reach like that, it just puts so much force on the backside of the body. It's tough. What do you guys see from this jumper?
But yeah, free. You said left foot, right? Penultimate here.
Left foot penultimate, yeah.
The biggest thing I saw was just that. I mean, the huge reach coming off for sure. I mean, that just looks painful. And then, so you would say this was better than what she was doing heading into the penultimate. Was her penultimate more like what it was heading into takeoff?
Correct. Yeah, it was really just. I mean, it was as if she landed right on that frame that you had. And instead finally got her to feel what it was like for it to land, under her hips, or at least where she perceived that to be.
And did you just cue her like land with a vertical shin, or was it just, bring the foot underneath your hips? Or
I talked way more about the hips. I think it's hard for athletes to feel the vertical shin when they're backside like she was. Mm-hmm. So, she had a lot of work to do on her running mechanics too. And once those got set up, then I could talk to her a little bit more about shin angles, because she had the air time to feel it. But I just told her, I want you to feel your foot right under your hips when it lands. Like if it's in front of your hips at all, then you're feeling it wrong. And while, with most athletes who want to cue that rolling rocking chair penultimate, I tried to ask her to be truly flat-footed. It's like, no, I want you to feel it flat, not on the toe, but flat instead of on the heel. And those started to help. And she wound up PRing by like a foot her freshman year. It was nice.
I think that's an important nuance there. Like, people ask me, what do you cue with penultimate takeoff? And I'm like, with most of them, it's just like the rolling or rocking chair type deal. But at times, like you have to say flat.
It just depends on the air.
Front, you can't, you just have to have the ability to adapt and not, just stick with the same stuff for everybody.
The kid with the headband, the young kid that I showed, he had a problem, like when we were doing pop-ups, he would ground it way out in front of his center of gravity, and you could hear it. We'd be in the gym, and you would hear his penultimate, and I would. So I told him, I said, step on a feather on your penultimate, and if I hear anything, it's going to be your jump step, not your penultimate. And just like you said, you got to have meaningful cues, and for him, that's one of the ones that click. Like as soon as I told him to make that penultimate light and step on a feather, he grounded it underneath him and got the rocking chair effect. And
that's awesome.
And it was that just found something that made sense to him, instead of putting that foot out in front of him, just to put it underneath. And that worked. Is this, where is she from?
She's from Chicago. She went to, oh man, where did Nikyra go to school? Let me double check.
So it's, when you're go ahead and go through the jump.
She went to Ogden International High School in Chicago.
Where do you cue as far as swing leg coming through? What do you guys like to see? Go back just a little bit here. Go to
as the penultimate leg comes through from
so like her heel, or I know in triple jump I talk about foot to foot pass, and so what do you guys cue as far as that?
I usually like to see parallel coming through.
Yeah, I actually don't cue it much. I just I make sure that they push off well. She pushes off too well, but as long as you like land, with the vertical shin on the penultimate, let the foot roll behind you a little bit, it should come through in a sweeping motion. So I just tell them to feel a big sweep of the leg as it comes through. But if I haven't had to cue it much unless there's been a problem with the penultimate, but then a cue there wouldn't help too much anyway. So I actually haven't found much success trying to cue the leg as it drives through or swings through.
Yeah, that seems like one of those problems where if you do the penultimate, it kind of self-corrects.
Yeah, I'll get a lot of guys that'll bring the foot up to the butt, and that's it's not like I've never found success just saying, just keep that leg low and bring it through. Like it's always what happened before,
and I think it's speed determinant too. Like just like in sprinting, when you jog, you're not kicking up to your butt like you do in max velocity sprinting. So similarly, I think this was an 8-step approach. So you may not see that heel come up to the butt as much as you would in a full jump from 18 steps.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Anything else?
No.
Go. I don't know why it jumps to that. It's strange. Okay. Ah. Oh, there we go.
So this was a sophomore at this time, and she was a good sprinter. She ran 12:1 in the 100, and she was one of those athletes who would just come straight off the board like a laser beam. And so we worked for a long, long time, first on trying to get her more upright sprinting into the board, and then to work on having, her penultimate land underneath her, have the shin rotate forward a little bit, and she made a lot of progress, and her PR went up a really nice amount this year. So that's about as good as we could ask for on the penultimate. But as you saw from her third to last step to that step, she really reached for it. And so the heel being that far in front is going to slow her down pretty badly. But we just kept working on it, and it cleared up. She was another one where, she used to feel her foot like almost behind her when she lands. So this was a point where we were really over cueing it, asking her to, like, all right, I want you to really feel your heel roll in front of you to set up the jump and like feel some flight coming off the takeoff. And I think she did, and it kind of got back to the middle by the time the season was over, and she placed well at conference, jumped a few PRs. So what do you guys see here?
Go back to give me like right before penultimate. I'm just looking at hip displacement here.
Mm.
It's funny how many kids I have come to me and they have this like in their minds. They're like, Coach, I got to drop my hips more. And I'm like, guys, I watch slow motion video all the time. And I said, even seeing a million long jumps in my life, like sometimes it's just, you know, it's so minute that you don't even.
No, and that's why I think it's better to talk about the shin, you know, just rotating forward and down a little bit more if you're trying to get that lowering, because you know the hips will follow the shin. Like when you're in support and on the ground, if your shin rotates, your hips have to go down a little bit. And you're right, it's not going to be too much, because if it is too much, then it's not going to go very well.
No.
Have you, so I've had athletes that just the mobility piece of this would not allow there's just no way, like there's some athletes that would just not be able to get in that position. Have you ever run into that?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, that's pretty.
Yeah, like just the ankle mobility,
Right.
to roll off of it that way.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that might be helpful there is if you talk about the toes, like imagine that my fingers are your toes, and instead of having them feel the ankle roll so that their ankle's compressing forward, have them feel the toes roll. And
Mm-hmm.
that way the ankle doesn't need to do as much
Right.
work, but if they like just support themselves on their toes as they roll through, it'll help them get that lowering a little bit.
Yeah. And that's what you can see she's doing.
Yeah.
I mean, she's rolling onto her forefoot there,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, to get there, to get that shin drop. And it's there's a lot of similarities really with acceleration there too. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then she, after all those high jump mat long jumps, you know, she used to be a serial, you know, just let me have my free leg hang closed up and tight and fall into the pit face first, but she worked hard to overcome that.
Mm-hmm.
Then I put two more in there. One of Nikaira from 2 years later, and then one of Julian from his last year.
So we'll do this one first, maybe.
So is Julian still training?
He was until everything got shut down. Yeah, he went to USA's and has best placing ever at a USATF meet. So it was a nice start to the season, and then
Yep.
it all went away. So this is another girl long jumper.
Is this the? No, this isn't the. I want to get the.
I think that one might still be loading.
Still working. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You can pull up Julian's if you want to, the January 23rd one. So Julian coming into this year had a bad habit at meets where he felt a lot of pressure of really closing up in his last, 6 or so steps. And we really tried hard working on it all year. And so that was the big focus of this jump session, was really good bounce and vertical shin angles in the run. And then he had a pretty good high school coach, so his takeoff never needed too much work. I mean that sincerely. Like when I got there and we had our first few practices, I was like, like you don't need to learn how to jump at all.
I just called him a bad word one time. I can't say it on here, but after that, it all clicked.
It was fairly effective with him.
It better been because his dad was standing right behind me, and he's a scary guy.
He is. I think Julian, certainly out of anyone I've ever coached, really rotated his shin forward on his penultimate the best, which allowed him to use as much of his speed as possible. And so if you go back to when his shin's vertical at touchdown, and then from here it just rotates forward, which allows his hips to drop. But his hips still move forward through that time. And so when he lands on the takeoff, he's really loaded up on that jump leg and able to use it pretty well.
Yeah.
So I already know what you guys are going to say, but I know there's another group out there. Go back to plant. So if you do some checking, there's people that cue. You know, I always say putting your foot onto the slipper or heel toe onto the board. If you search YouTube, you can find some pretty big SEC schools with their jumps coach talking about pawing and trying to pull that jump foot underneath. What do you guys cue on your plant right there?
I'm with you. I'll say, I mean, at time, depending on the athlete, like if they're a horrible reacher, I'll say try to get underneath your hips, but I don't use paw, you know, and I mean, I've been told by some coaches like saying heel toe or, you know, rocking chair or whatever is awful because they're going to lose velocity. Like, and I'm like, well, do you want them to hit on their forefoot then? You know, like, and that'll make them lose velocity more than anything because they're just going to collapse onto their heels. So
yeah, one of the best things I ever heard Boo say, somebody asked him about heel bruises in the triple jump and said, how do you prevent that? He said, get them to quit landing on their toes. And the guy was like, no, I'm not talking. He's like, he lands on his toes. He said, the reason you get heel bruises is because you land on your toe and then your foot collapses, which is same thing here. You can't have that much force going into the ground on your toe and not have your heel, you know, follow it. So I've never, and even when I hear it, it still kind of bothers me, but hearing coaches talk about actively pulling that plant foot underneath you as you long jump. And
I think, you know, if you cue sprinting that way too, like if it may make more sense, but if you're talking about pushing up in the steps coming in and then have them switch from pushing to pulling, that's a really difficult thing, I think, for their brains to wrap around. But I just tell them to push up. Like, I actually don't even worry about anything going this way, because to me, if the run is good and fast, like this way is all taken care of. We need this way for it to be an effective long jump. So I just tell them to push up off the board, and you want displacement at the toe off of takeoff, right? You don't want a straight up angle, but I think that's where the penultimate takes care of it, because if the penultimate's left behind, then it'll swing through long and you won't be able to take off until it comes through. So you get that position without having to be like, oh, well, let me, you know, push back behind you really hard.
I wish I knew what that felt like. Just me. Just like that would be awesome. Just to be like, Ding.
Yeah, just floating. Julian actually, because of that, he had a lot of landing troubles too, his last year especially, and he was the first athlete that I like worked intensely on landing, because I said, like, my normal thought process is, well, we've got bigger fish to fry. You know, we've got to worry about their running mechanics and their takeoff mechanics before I worry about how they land. But when you're talking about margins for All-American spots, that starts to matter a little bit more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
didn't a 1/4 inch separate like 5 guys in? Was that his senior year when?
Yeah, he jumped. I don't know what it is in feet, but he jumped 776, and he was 12th, and 7th place was 782 or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So 2 inches roughly, which was kind of wild. Especially.
Yeah, that's when you really can value working on landing and justifying it. Whereas, you know, for me being a high school coach, it's, you know, it's like you said, bigger fish to fry. Let's
Yeah.
let's have a great push at the beginning of your approach. Let's have a penultimate step, and
Yeah.
so yeah. But with someone
And
elite like that, makes sense.
fixing all those issues for the high school kid, a lot of times they'll fix the landing issues too.
Yes, precisely. But like you said, Rob, when you're up there floating like MJ, I think there's some different feelings, and like you have to actually be trying to do what you have to do when you have that much time in the air.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Which one here?
It's the one on the right, all the way
Right.
on the right.
Okay.
So right away you can see her running posture has made some good improvements.
That's better.
I'm glad you think so.
I didn't say ouch when I saw that one. So
Yeah, you were just like, she reached a little bit.
Mm. How far did she go?
Her wind aided PR was 20'6", and then non-wind aided was 19'11". What's funny is she ran 12.4, I think, in high school, and like 25.4. And when I taught her how to accelerate hard and sprint upright, she never beat her high school PR all 4 years of college in the 100. Because when they recruited her, they were like, oh, well, she could help in the sprints too. And I thought, yeah, totally. And I ruined her in one event, but thankfully she got pretty good at the other one. What do you guys see here that you would ask her to change if she showed up at your practice?
I would be pretty happy if she showed up to my practice.
This was her junior year, and her senior year I took a new job, but we would have hopefully finally gotten to the bottom of that smaller reach at takeoff, and really then I would have told her to feel her foot like come underneath her a little bit more.
Mhm.
Almost like a paw. It'd be terrible.
I mean, this is really good, right? I mean, that's
Mm-hmm. And she, you know, you were talking about Tincher his senior year, how he was in a place mechanically where meet after meet he was just hitting it and hitting it and hitting it. She got to a place that way her junior year too. Like you just knew that as long as there wasn't a problem, she was going to jump far. She was pretty consistent and locked in.
So would you say you were going with still encouraging less of a push off the penultimate here?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
then
would
just
say,
trying to get that underneath a little bit more.
yeah, more so, not less of a push, but like feeling the push end sooner, if that makes sense. Because she really like feels the push all the way till her foot leaves the ground. And I would have instead said like, all right, I just want you to push, you know, for half of that time, hoping that that would, you know, just time it up a little bit better. Because, you know, for the way I look at it, for as long as she's pushing on one end, her takeoff foot's going to keep getting out there. And so if she were to stop pushing, you know, 6 inches shorter, hopefully the takeoff would be on the ground.
Gotcha.
6 inches sooner. Because it's not, it wasn't bad by this time, but it did show up at, you know, in meets when you're coming off speed and there's just that little extra bit of time in the air before takeoff.
Gotcha.
Didn't help her take as much speed as possible. She had quite a few jumps that year that like just were in the air forever. Like, holy cow, she got, you know, pop off the board and everything, and it would land at like, you know, low 19s, which is still a really good jump, but you know, she was definitely missing that last piece to take a lot of those jumps where they needed to go for her to be a legal 20-footer instead of wind aided.
March 17, right?
Yeah, that's the last one.
Okay, cool.
And Ivory and Nakaira were the first two girls that we watched, and this one has another girl, Brittany, first, so we can just watch her and then shut it down. And Brittany was, she was kind of the problem you're used to seeing, I think, which is somebody who jumps well but doesn't really set up the jump as good as possible with the penultimate. And so, you know, we were really trying to get her to go from being a really decent jumper to, you know, getting a little more mechanically sound. Oh, wait. That's Nakaira.
Okay.
So maybe Brittany's a little farther forward. You're kidding. Brittany's not even in this video. That's a bad look on my part. She didn't long jump as often as I would have liked because she was mainly a triple jumper and hurt sometimes. Let me see if I have any long jump film. If not, we'll here we go. The rare long jump film. And I always felt bad because Brittany, she had pretty bad patellar issues. She partially tore it her freshman year and never got surgery. So it healed on its own pretty well, but some days it would, you know, act up. And I was like, oh man, it's such a bummer. I wish you could, you know, just power through a little bit more. And then I had knee issues this past year, and man, they suck.
I'm putting together like a resource or and I was skipping and galloping and doing all kinds of crap yesterday, and I'm pretty sore today. I don't know. I don't even. What am I? 38, I think.
Still young.
So yeah, I mean, I feel good, but yeah, and I don't really
I've
do
been
too
running on
much
the
outside of playing
treadmill pretty
basketball here and there.
consistent.
I need to do some more explosive stuff regularly.
I've been on the treadmill pretty consistent. And I went to SIUE's campus and ran today. It was
Nice.
kind of eerie running around a campus that's dead. I mean, it
I
felt
can
like
imagine.
zombie land, but a little bit different running outside than on a treadmill.
Way different. Yeah.
Yeah,
Same with biking.
you have to use
I
your
feel it
hamstring.
already.
Yeah, my wife and I walk a lot. And, my wife was like we were walking the other day, and she's sprinting some, and she woke up the next day and she's like, and she would do some treadmill running and whatever, and she's like, God, my hamstrings hurt. And I'm like, like what? But they don't hurt when I do the treadmill. I'm like, yeah, it's totally different.
Way different. So we were just working on her feeling her penultimate on the ground a little longer, trying to leave it behind her. It's her left foot. This was
It
decent, but
doesn't roll as much as the others.
yeah, and you can just see all the flight time between when one foot leaves and the other hits the ground. But what made her a mediocre long jumper made her a really good triple jumper. So you got to pick your battles, and she was a conference champion in triple jump, and long jump was okay. So I tried not to hammer on it too much. You know,
Go to her third. Did you ever talk to her about pushing up in 3 here?
yeah, that's definitely the needs most work. I mean, man, that's rough.
So right now you would just cue her to push vertical on 3.
Yeah, and I would also in her run just make sure she feels her hips under her more before she enters those last 3 steps, because if they're not there by then, it's really difficult to push up well. Because she does push up, like there's flight time there.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah.
So does that third step then is going to be a little bit longer if you're spending a little bit more time in the air?
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like cueing that reduces speed because they're pushing up so much that it's almost like they're hopping into it? And
it does happen for sure. It happened with Devontae for a little bit when we
yep, that's where I was
started
going
working on
with it.
that. But it cleaned up over time. I was fortunate in the college, like this video I think is from November. So at this point we still had 2 months until we even had a meet. So it was a fairy tale world where you can let these changes like simmer slowly and they never have to compete in the intermediate term. Whereas we've all, like in the high school level, you're working on something and they haven't figured it out yet, but they're not doing the old thing that they were comfortable with anymore. So they suck for a little bit. College coaches are lucky that time all happens behind closed doors and you just get to see the finished product. But yeah, so that's why like here pushing up is the correct thing to ask, but because of how her hips are tilted, I think that cue would hurt her because it just causes that big long step.
Yeah.
And instead would hopefully just talk about hip posture.
I think Devontae might be one of the only athletes that I've ever actually referenced the third step. I mean, every athlete gets a different dose. You're not going to teach calculus to somebody who's, still trying to add and subtract. So you never know what cues, and Devontae was pretty intelligent. He ate that stuff up. And so we could kind of get a little bit more technical, but I noticed in 3, he would almost, it almost like he was hopping into his penultimate. And so,
Yeah.
I thought maybe I created a monster with
No.
Q in it, but it was really noticeable at slow speed at short approach jumps. But as he started to go faster, it wasn't as as hoppy.
Yeah. And we had, with Devontae, we just had more time to like spend on some technical work with sprinting.
Yeah.
And once because he was a little bit tilted and not quite as front side as you'd ideally. He was still in a really good place coming out of high school though. But once it got like really good, then his third to last step started happening a lot more naturally. There wasn't that hopping there. But yeah, so with this athlete on the penultimate, what we really worked on was just feeling. I told her to feel the ball of her foot on the ground until her takeoff foot hit the ground. And this was in November, but she, worked on it as often as we could. And by the time outdoor came, she finally jumped well and put it all together at our conference meet, thankfully. And on that jump, it was like really smooth and really clean. Everything you hope you're working on all year just coming together in one good jump.
Anything else?
Not that I have.
What's that?
You can kind of tell she's got a triple jump background. You could see that.
Yep.
All
And she
right.
was good. Anytime one of our boys talks crap, I just say, well, you don't jump as far as the best girl I've had. So
Good deal.
That was awesome, guys. Appreciate it.
thanks, Tyler.
Yeah.